Welcome everyone to the Patron Leader Institute Module 9, which is focused in on understanding policies and procedures. Every event and facility has numerous rules, policies, procedures, employee manuals, and other information that directs the behavior and actions of numerous individuals. Policies and procedures apply not just to patrons, but also you, employees, and as well as patron leaders. You all have to follow policies and procedures, so it's important to understand them. PLs need to know these rules and feel comfortable communicating this information and enforcing such rules as part of their responsibility. Some examples of possible policies and procedures for patrons as well as for patron leaders could be maybe not serving any patron more than 2 alcoholic beverages in any given transaction. Sounds like a smart decision, right? Even though it's limiting sales, it might make people think twice about trying to drink as much or maybe giving beer to someone who's not of age. Another policy requiring bag searches for all patrons coming into the facility. People might not like it, but it presents a safer environment for everyone. Maybe not allowing bottles into a facility, not allowing patrons to bring in their own food into a facility. The whole thing with peanut allergies, so that's a bigger concern now. Maybe requiring kids under the age of 17 to be accompanied by an adult. Maybe possible ejection of people for using profanity, maybe from a fan code of conduct. Maybe not allowing patrons to move from their designated seat to an open seat. Maybe not allowing beverages of any kind to be in the venue. Hopefully you don't have that, but that could be a policy. Maybe excluding bottles, glass, containers, cans, or any other items that can be thrown by individuals. You might see it, no flags, things like that, as a way to prevent blocked views, no umbrellas. Maybe prohibiting food of any type. Maybe prohibiting any sharp objects that can be used as a weapon. Maybe prohibiting any hard, blunt objects that could also be used as a weapon. Maybe prohibiting fireworks, often called missiles or flares that are often used in European soccer games. Maybe not allowing an audio-video recording device to come in. That's a lot harder now with our phones now. Maybe prohibiting spiked attire. Maybe prohibiting chain wallets. Maybe excluding any non-service animals. Those are all examples of policies that could apply. So let's start off by looking at how do you develop these rules or these policies. So the goal here is to understand how rules are developed based on past events or concerns, which is oftentimes how you do it. You find out something happened, you say, we have to have a rule to prevent this from happening in the future. So if I ask you to name several different entities that can develop rules, you might say government, maybe regulators, maybe a fire marshal, police, OSHA, FEMA, maybe a league or corporate office, maybe a conference or association or an insurance company. Various people can come forward saying you need to develop a rule. And if you do, you have to follow it. So the first thing is we have to identify one past issue that led to a rule. Let's say a fan complains and that creates a no alcohol section. Maybe increased signage due to confusion. Maybe glass bottles are being thrown, so they ban bottles. Those are all examples of how something occurred where a rule came after that. Then the question becomes, who enforces it? Some might say it should be the supervisors or police or government officials, but it could also be you. So let's see what rules patron leaders must follow. For example, don't be rude or vulgar. Follow directions. Never damage property. Never violate safety rules. Don't sleep on the job. Don't accept bribes. Never leave your post. Those are rules that can affect you and be directly attributable to your job and how do you do your job. Remember, you'll never be penalized for trying to do the right thing and make a facility or event and patrons as safe as possible. So follow the rules and try to make sure that you understand what the rules are that apply. You can ask questions about it. It's not a problem at all, and no manager will ever tell you, no, don't ask me questions about the rules. They're going to say, okay, you have a question about the rules? Let's discuss this in greater detail so you understand why we're doing it. Oftentimes when you understand why a rule is in place, it makes it easier for you to explain it to other people going forward. All right, it's not enough just to have a rule. You have to communicate the rule, and that's where this next section comes into play, rule communication. The goal here is to appreciate the importance of reading, knowing, communicating, and following policies and procedures. Patrons normally are more upset with unwritten rules compared to written rules. Even if it's a rule they don't agree with, if it's written down, they might accept it. If it's saying, oh, it's an unwritten rule, they might be, hey, why are you doing it now? What is an access control policy? Let's give that as an example. It might be what vehicles people are allowed in a given area and which areas. How is it communicated? In this example, it could be with signs, maybe announcement over the PA systems. It could be patron leaders talking with patrons. It could be on a ticket. Okay. Let's look at another one. What is a beverage policy? What beverages are allowed? How and when could they be purchased, as an example? How is it communicated? Signs, announcements, patron leaders talking with patrons. Do you get a theme here? It's about announcing it and communicating it to everybody else. Let's give another one. What is an ejection policy? What is the appropriate behavior and reasons why a patron can be ejected? Is it fighting? Is it cursing? Is it misbehaving? What reasons? How is it communicated? Signs, announcements over the PA system. It could be on the ticket, and it could be, most importantly, you giving them a warning. So as an example, it'll be critical for you to figure out what signs you would like to see, because that's something that we keep raising. So what are 3 signs that you might wish were in existence at a facility? Maybe wait time for concession lines. Maybe policies for screening. What forbidden items listed, and putting it in the parking lot so that people can know, let me leave it in the car. Maybe wait time for restroom stalls. These are all different things that you'd like to get information about. The more information you'd like to get, others would like to get that as well. So what are the different techniques to help communicate all these rules, policies, and procedures? As we've talked about before, one is yourself. The biggest one we've been talking about are signs, but people don't read signs. Posters, ticket backs, flyers, doing it with a music video, maybe a video on the public address system, maybe a public service announcement, maybe word of mouth. Maybe it's you as the rule communicator. And that's critical, that if you can communicate the rule and then have it on a card, let's say the fan code of conduct, be able to give it to someone, that is great. The next area talks about rule enforcement. It's not enough that you develop rules. You have to communicate the rules and you have to enforce it. So the goal of this section is identify techniques that will help you enforce the rules. And we're going to use here what we call the CLEAR approach, C-L-E-A-R. So the C in the CLEAR approach is communicate. Communicate with a patron that a rule has or is being violated. Showing them the fan code of conduct as an example proves you're not making a rule up. You're not out there to get them and trying to develop something out of thin air. The L stands for listen. What should the PA listen for? Well, what the patron has to say. You want to hear their side. They might admit, yeah, I violated the rule. Yeah, you caught me with a cigarette or whatever it might be. Or they might say, no, it wasn't me. E, explain. Explain the rule or penalty to make sure that all the parties are on the same page. This is the rule. This is why we have to follow it. The A in this acronym stands for attitude. Leave your attitude at the door. It is not you versus them, but how to reach a resolution so hopefully both parties win or some other resolution is in fact reached. The R stands for reach a conclusion. Resolve the issue and make sure there is some finality. Whether it's a handshake between people, maybe it's an oral or written reprimand, maybe it's expulsion from the event or facility, maybe it's calling in a supervisor, maybe calling in the police. You have to have some kind of resolution. You're empowered to use your discretion to enforce some rules. However, there are going to be rules that need to be always enforced. For example, emergency situations which can result in serious injury or death. You don't have the flexibility to say, okay, I'm not going to enforce that rule. Rule enforcement should look towards the future and a solution rather than to punish a violator. So with that, we have to understand the framework of rules. because rules, the policies and procedures there's going to be rules that relate to you and your job, when you could take your lunch break, when you are deployed. Can you be deployed here? Can you be deployed there? Where are you going to be deployed? What kind of training you might have? Do you need a guard card? There's going to be a lot of different rules for you, but what we're really focusing in on here are the rules that you're going to have for the fans. And you have to make sure that you are part of the process of helping to develop rules. So if you see something, you could raise it to a supervisor or to management saying, I think there should be a rule for X. That becomes part of the rule making. Now, they might have a lot of rules. They might say, we're not interested in developing any more rules. That is fine. But if you're part of the process, you go through and you identify what the rules are. Make sure you're familiar with them. Whether it's in the fan code of conduct or any other kind of document, make sure you're familiar with it. Then make sure you're actively communicating that to the fans. Whoever it might be there, you want to be able to communicate to them. So it's like if you have a given area that's at the front of a stage, and you might have a barricade there, and the policy might be, hey, look at, you know what, we're going to have general admission seating. They're going to come up here and be as fast as possible. That doesn't mean you cannot talk to the fans that are there and say, look at, you know what, there could be issues. There could be such a compact area. You might not be able to get out if there is a crowd surge. Or you might not be able to go and get water or drinks or whatever it might be. Just have that as a piece of information. That's not necessarily policy, but that could be a communication effort. And the more you can communicate to other people and let them know that you're on their side, they're going to listen to you when you have to convey a policy or a rule or a regulation or whatever you want to call it for that venue. So it's important for you to be able to know what the rules are, communicate it, and then enforce it. So as an example, if there's a concert going on and someone jumps the barricade or is doing crowd surfing and is brought to the front of the barricade, oftentimes the policy is to take a marker pen and mark their hand that they've gone over once, and then you convey to them that, hey, look at, this is not allowed. If you come back over here again and we see that mark, we're going to kick you out of the venue. So there is a rule. You're trying to minimize the amount of crowds misbehaving, but maybe also crowd surfing, which can lead to injuries and things like that. You have it communicated. It's probably going to be on signs. It's going to be on the PA system. It's going to be in different areas. You communicate it to them. You tell them about it, and now you enforce it by marking their hand. And then if they do it again, you can feel free to say, hey, look at, I warned you. You didn't heed my warning. I'm going to kick you out now. Any supervisor will support you in that effort, that you've gone through the process of having the rules, communicating the rules, and enforcing them. So as you go out there, it's important for you to know what the rules are, communicate it, and enforce it. But as I said, there is some flexibility. If someone used the F word once, and while that might be a violation of the fan code of conduct, that is not going to necessarily be a reason to write them up, give them a written warning or something else like that. Depending upon the venue, oftentimes you have to record all warnings that you are providing to fans. So that's something to think about, that it might just be, hey, look at, don't do that. And then they behave well. You've done your job. They know that you're monitoring the situation and you're over there. But if they do not listen and they keep dropping the F-bomb every third word in front of little kids, well, there's a rule. You've communicated it to them. They've heard it over the loudspeakers, obviously. They know common courtesy and everything else. It's your job to enforce it. And so that is where discretion leaves when you know it's been impacting other people and it's gone on in the past. Also, it's important to monitor a situation. If there has been a confrontation in the past and there have been rule violations, be clear to people saying, hey, look, at any further violations, I'm going to move you. I'm going to exclude you from this part of the event. I'm going to kick you out of the building. We're going to give you a non-attendance document, which is going to prohibit you from coming back to this venue. And it might be a lifetime ban until they do something like a course or apologize in writing or whatever it might be, depending upon the venue. So there's a lot to do with rules. The more you know and the more you can communicate and enforce it, the better your job's going to be. That's it for this training module. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you learned a lot, and see you out there in the stadiums and arenas and other venues out there. Take care. Bye-bye.